the future of the internet and digital rights, and we are going to jump right into it because we have a very small amount of time for an enormous topic and some wonderful guests here to discuss it. So I'm going to jump right in and just mention that when the nations of the world, as Scott Campbell was describing for us, came together 70 years ago to sign on to a list of principles that we as humans share, our human rights, it was, as he described, after a great catastrophe that had brought the world together in a common threat and a realization that we truly are in this together. And we, yet again, face many challenges, and we are connected, as we all know, as never before in history. In many cases, these violations of human rights that continue to occur are instantaneously shared across the world. So what is our responsibility as individuals, as companies, as technologists, as humans, to carry forward the list of principles that was signed on to by countries 70 years ago? How do we act now as individuals and humans in the 70 years to come? And I'm going to start with Adrian, President and CEO of the World Wide Web Foundation. You work with Tim Berners-Lee on the contract for the web that he mentioned. So before that, you were with Oxfam, the One Campaign, Save the Children. How is the Web Foundation thinking about the future of human rights and what role the web plays in that?
Well, I think it's funny you mentioned those organizations I've previously worked with, because it feels like today, this day, 70th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights. You know, for me, brings together a lot of the parts of the work that I do to be healthy, to be able to earn a living, to learn, to be educated, but also those rights to express ourselves, to realize our true potential. And that is a right that is being delayed right now. And Martin Luther King, I think, said, "The right delayed is a right denied." We're at that 50-50 moment, as Tim and Vint and others said earlier today, where finally more than half the world is online. But there's no sense of complacency, should be no sense of complacency that's going to naturally go up and up and up and reach everybody. In fact, on our figures, even to get 90% of the world connected, it looks like it'll take till about 2042 to reach that point. That's not okay. That's not consistent with securing people's basic rights. We have to move faster. We have to be much more determined. There's a particular challenge around gender. And the right of women and girls to be connected and to realize that wider set of human rights is lagging well behind the rights of, or the opportunities that men have at the moment. So we've got that challenge, and I know just a quick finish, but it's not, of course, just about getting people connected, it's about what they're being connected to, and that's really where the contract for the web comes in, to bring these two parts together, to say that we have to figure out what are the responsibilities of governments, of companies, and of citizens to ensure that everyone can get connected and that it's a web worth connecting to. And it's great that we've got governments, including we've got the French government and now the German government on board with these core principles. We've got companies from Google and Facebook to Anchor Free to Cloudflare to Twitter now as well, who just joined up the other day. and terrific civil society organizations like the New Now, who are represented here, Access Now, and hundreds now of others. So it's coming together, but we need everyone engaged because we think these questions are hard, as we've heard already today. It's not going to be easy to figure out how we balance the right responsibilities for each of those groups, governments, companies, and citizens. But we do think that, if you like, the contract for the web is almost a declaration of the responsibilities that we all have in order to secure that Declaration of Rights.
Speaking of responsibilities, there is a new lab now at the University of California, Berkeley, led by Brandie. You've been thinking about these questions for a long time, digital inclusion, and also what comes with that, and certain risks that come with that. Also as a fellow at the World Economic Forum's Council for Digital Economy and Society. So how are you thinking about this double-edged sword?
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm Brandie Nonnecke. I'm the new founding director of the CITRIS Policy Lab, where we support interdisciplinary technology policy research and engagement to better ensure technology is developed in the interest of society. I know it's been said 100 times today, but we're celebrating the 70th anniversary of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And I think we can all agree that within the last year, we've seen many of those rights being harmed, and especially being harmed by technology. We've seen huge data breaches. We've seen social media platforms utilize automated bot accounts to sway public opinion. We're also seeing the development of facial recognition systems tethered to social credit scoring. And together, we are now in a position where the technology is moving so quickly and being applied in ways that determines whether or not people have access to their human rights. And so I wanted to come up with 3 recommendations for where I think that we should be going in the future. So the first, I would say diversity. There's a wonderful book by an author. The book is called The Difference, and his name is Scott Page, almost escaped me. But in that book, he found out that more diverse teams were superior at solving complex problems than a team that had a very high IQ score. We are in our current situation in many ways because we do not have diverse leadership and thought opinion on these issues. We lack diversity among teams developing the technologies. The second recommendation, I would say, accountability. It is time where tech companies come forward and take accountability for their actions in the design and deployment of technology. But in the same breath, I will say that we are seeing tech companies coming out and taking more of that responsibility, and we're moving in the right direction. And then the third recommendation, I would say diligence. I think even based here in Silicon Valley, there is a tech fetishism. Sometimes you don't need a new technology, you don't need that fancy new machine learning model. Instead, you maybe need to go talk to someone, set up a new policy, engage a different lever to solve that problem. So that's what I would end with. We need greater diversity, greater accountability, and greater diligence.
Thank you so much. So Dion, as VP and an analyst at Constellation Research, you're one of our hosts, so thank you very much for having us. You work with business leaders and CIOs all over the world, and in some cases we're seeing that decisions about human rights and how technology will impact policy gets embedded in code before it's even contemplated in policy and law. And frequently, technology is moving much faster than our lawmakers' understanding of the technology itself and certainly of its implications. So how are leaders thinking about this responsibility? How can we incentivize people to think about human rights as they're building the code, even if sometimes it impacts the bottom line, even if sometimes it costs money? How can we incentivize these leaders to do the right thing?
Absolutely. Thanks, Marci. So there's a saying in the application development community that code is law, and so you're exactly right.
Very less.
A lot of the de facto laws are being enshrined in the code that's being written all around the world today and is increasingly operating the world. And we're fortunate in our organization to work with 2 different types of leaders. One are the large tech companies. We advise on their product strategies and the roadmaps and what the opportunities are. And they're concerned about making sure that they're delivering value to their customers. And we also work with those too, which are large organizations who are trying to apply digital technologies to make their customers happy, to make their shareholders happy. And the typical IT organization, which the CIO spends about 50% of all the digital money inside a large organization globally, They're primarily focused around next quarterly results, their current project portfolio, and the huge backlog that's growing and to satisfy the needs of their stakeholders. They're not so much worried about this, except when they're forced to. So things like GDPR, right, the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, has been kind of imposed on the tech industry and on large organizations, and we now see that on every single web page. So the internet is now covered with GDPR regulation. When we actually look at it, isn't practical to comply with. So not only are a lot of laws being encoded in the services and the products that companies developed, but the regulations don't actually reflect what is even technically possible. Like the right to be forgotten, which is enshrined in the GDPR, is a great notion. This is whenever you want to, you should be able to go to a company and say, forget everything you know about me. Our technologies are not designed to make that possible. We can barely connect the customer information inside our organizations at all, much less be able to go through every backup tape and eradicate it, which is what's required, and it's just not practical. So the regulations aren't practical, and the technology is moving too quickly. And so what we'd like to have these leaders understand that the internet is here to stay forever. It's probably going to be around in some version for the rest of human history. The decisions we make today have momentous consequences because they're hard to unshape, because the code is now distributed to billions of people, right? The way that all of this is shaped defines how it works. And so with great power comes great responsibility, as they say. And we all have that. We have to do it because it's our medium as well as these leaders have to understand that they're shaping the world forever and they will be remembered. And so one of the things we're increasingly recommending is, just like we have nutrition labels on all of our food, make sure that we think it's safe to eat, then we need a digital human rights scorecard for every technology product and service that allows us to understand, should I be participating in this? Should I be consuming it? Is it good for me? Right now, we don't have that information, and without informed choice, we can't do anything in that. So that's the next place we have to work at.
I wish we had a long time to talk about who would be designing that label. Fantastic. Aziz, you are an award-winning journalist, human rights defender, and technologist. You founded Raqqa is Being Slaughtered Silently to raise awareness about the issues that were happening in Syria. You're a New Now Fellow working on the contract with the Web Foundation. And in 2014, you wrote an op-ed entitled, "Bombs Will Not Defeat ISIS, but Maybe the Internet Will." So that was a time of optimism in 2014, 4 years ago. And for many of us, the optimism is tarnished by the tragic stories that we hear about attacks that have been fueled by disinformation on the web, many spread through social media. So how do you feel now about the internet's contribution to human rights and its potential to be a force for good for the future?
Yes, so I've heard from many friends and people talking about the idea why we don't shut down the internet, so we don't have extremism and terrorism all over. So some people, they try to look at the negative side of the internet and forget about the positive one. So I would say without the internet, we would not have Arabic Spring, we would not have revolutions. So 40 or 50 years ago, many things happened, and many human rights abuses and violations, many massacres, and the world haven't heard about it because people had no access to the internet. Right now, since 50% of the world has access to the internet, people, they can report about stories that could not be reported. So journalists, people, they can go all over the world and report about places. So citizens themselves with the internet turn to be the journalists themselves. They turn to be the people who are telling stories and telling the truth. So that was a powerful way. And in the New Now, which is a new collective focusing on the rising generation, we believe that using the web create opportunity for all people to express and explain themselves in a way to bring attention. So right now, half of the world, or over the half of the world, are under 30 years old. So it's so important to give those people a platform and to be able to change or affect the future of the world. So human rights has been an important issue, and the internet has played a main role with it. So it was in both ways, a good and bad way. So, and talking about different platforms Facebook or other social media platforms who've forgotten who built them. So they created an incredible opportunity for the world in collaboration with their users, but some of their users turned against them. And that's what we've seen like in Rouhania women and like the violation or like the beheading videos that being spread all over the internet. So rightly or wrongly, they're like involved in some point.
But you're optimistic about the internet and its ability to raise awareness and also to bring attention to the violations of human rights that are happening in the world.
Yeah, of course. So it's like the main tool right now. So for like many people who believe like in peaceful movement, the internet is like the main way to create this movement. So to copy this movements or like to transfer this movements from being in the streets, so it should be done like through the internet. So I would say like without the internet, like the work of my organization and the human rights violations that being committed by ISIS and other extreme groups will not exist or reach like international or global audience. And we are like in the new now, we're like so glad to work on the contract of the web. So, and for us, like we will use the power of crowdsourcing to make sure that the contract for web is built with voices of rising generation for the benefit of future generation. And we need to bring everyone online as quickly as possible. So, and like the same time, we need like to be sure that all people have not only access to the internet, but to have like equal access to the internet. So to have like more, like to have like equal freedom of using the internet. So using the internet here in the US or other countries is not the same like Syria, it's not the same like China. So we need like to ensure like the freedom of expression and the internet would be available in an equal way for everyone.
Thank you. Adrian, would you like to add anything more about the contract for the web?
Well, apart from being hugely proud that we're working with Aziz and the other champions of New Now, I mean, you know, it's going to be a real challenge. We have no illusions about this being an easy thing that we've, along with a lot of others, I hope, in this room, have bitten off here. It feels a bit like, it's like a sort of a traffic system in San Jose, isn't it? You know, on the one hand, you've got to have companies that build vehicles and cars and these little scooters I've seen. Everybody's on scooters now in San Jose, that work and that are safe and that do what they're supposed to do. You've got to have governments and authorities that set speed limits and put up the signs and so on. And then there's all of us as citizens who, yeah, we have to, you know, play by the rules. But it's more than that, isn't it? It's what I think Wendy was saying earlier this morning. You know, in that same analogy, it's taken decades, maybe even longer, to build up those kind of norms, those habits, those courtesies, those things that we all just know, or most people know to do to get through the day. And it's no surprise that on the web, where we've had a much shorter history, we're struggling to figure what those norms should be and what each of us have to do to play our part. And that challenge goes not just to citizens, but to governments and companies as well. And as Dion said, you know, what can companies do to nudge and to help us bring out our better selves, if you like, on the web?
And speaking of rules, we're getting the Constellation gavel. So thank you all for joining us on this important topic. Much more conversation to come. Thank you.